What are the sizes of silicon chips?
Small silicon chips may be no more than 1/16 square by 1/30 thick and hold up to tens of thousands of transistors. Large chips, the size of a postage stamp, can contain hundreds of millions of transistors.
How is casting out nines used to check the results of addition or multiplication?
The method of casting out nines is based on the excess of nines in digits of whole numbers. The remainder when a sum of digits is divided by 9. Illustrating this process in the multiplication example below. The method begins by adding the digits in both the multiplicand, one of the terms that is being multiplied, and the multiplier, the other term being multiplied. In the example below, this operation leads to the results of 13 and 12, respectively. If these results are greater than 9, then the operation is repeated until the resulting figures are less than 9. In the example below, the repeated calculation gives the results as 4 and 3, respectively. Multiply the resulting excess from the multiplicand by the excess from the multiplier, 433 below. Add the digits of the result to eventually yield a number equal to or less than 909. Repeat the process of casting out nines in the multiplication product. The result of the multiplication process. The result must equal the result of the previous set of transactions. In this case 3. If the two figures disagree, then the original multiplication procedure was done incorrectly. Casting out nines can also be applied to check the accuracy of the results of addition.
What period of time has come to be known as the Golden Age of microbiology?
The era known as the Golden Age of microbiology began in 1857, with the work of Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, and lasted about 60 years. During this period of time, there were many important scientific discoveries. Joseph Lister's, 1827 to 1912, practice of treating surgical wounds with a phenol solution led to the advent of aseptic surgery. The advancements Paul Ehrlich, 1854 to 1915, made to the theory of immunity synthesized the magic bullet, an arsenic compound that proved effective in treating syphilis in humans. In 1884 Elie Metchnikoff, 1845 to 1916, an associate of Pasteur, published a report on phagocytosis. The report explained the defensive process in which the body's white blood cells engulf and destroy microorganisms. In 1897 Masaki Ogata reported that rat fleas transmitted bubonic plague, ending the centuries-old mystery of how plague was transmitted. The following year, Kiyoshi Shiga, 1871 to 1957, isolated the bacterium responsible for bacterial dysentery. This organism was eventually named Shigella dysenterii. During the golden age of microbiology, researchers identified the specific microorganism responsible for numerous infectious diseases. The following chart identifies many of these diseases, their infectious agent, who discovered them, and the year they were discovered.
What is the composition of the Rock of Gibraltar?
It is composed of grey limestone, with a dark shale overlay on parts of its western slopes. Located on a peninsula at the southern extremity of Spain, the Rock of Gibraltar is a mountain at the east end of the Strait of Gibraltar. The narrow passage between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. The rock is 1,398 feet, 425 meters, tall at its highest point.
Why are the hot, humid days of summer called dog days?
This period of extremely hot, humid, sultry weather that traditionally occurs in the northern hemisphere in July and August received its name from the dog star Sirius of the constellation Canis Major. At this time of year, Sirius, the brightest visible star, rises in the east at the same time as the sun. Ancient Egyptians believed that the heat of this brilliant star added to the sun's heat to create this hot weather. Sirius was blamed for the withering droughts, sickness, and discomfort that occurred during this time. Traditional dog days start on July 3rd and end on August 11th.
What is amber?
Amber is the fossil resin of trees. The two major deposits of amber are in the Dominican Republic and Baltic. Amber came from a coniferous tree that is now extinct. Amber is usually yellow or orange in color, semi-transparent or opaque with a glossy surface. It is used by both artisans and scientists.
What are the blood group combinations that can normally be used to prove that a man is not the father of a particular child?
No child can acquire a gene, and consequently a blood grouping, if it is not possessed by either parent.
What are the largest Kuiper belt objects and how big are they?
The following table lists the largest KBOs in our solar system that are known of today.
What evidence has led scientists to believe land plants evolved from green algae?
Many scientists believe that ancient green algae evolved into land plants. The chloroplasts present in green algae are the same as those of land plants. In addition, green algae have cell walls of similar composition to land plants. Both store food, such as starch, in the same manner. Most green algae live in freshwater habitats with highly variable conditions. The ongoing changes in their environment have made them highly adaptable.
What is string theory?
A relatively recent theory in particle physics. String theory conceives elementary particles not as points but as lines or loops. The idea of these strings is purely theoretical since no string has ever been detected experimentally. The ultimate expression of string theory may potentially require a new kind of geometry, perhaps one involving an infinite number of dimensions.
What are the floaters that move around on the eye?
Floaters are semi-transparent specks perceived to be floating in the field of vision. Some originate with red blood cells that have leaked out of the retina. The blood cells swell into spheres, some forming strings, and float around the areas of the retina. Others are shadows cast by the microscopic structures in the vitreous humor, a jelly-like substructure located behind the retina. A sudden appearance of a cloud of dark floaters, if accompanied by bright light flashes, could indicate retinal detachment.
What is a control group?
A control group is the experimental group tested without changing the variable. For example, to determine the effect of temperature on seed germination. One group of seeds may be heated to a certain temperature. The percent of seeds in this group that germinates and the time it takes them to germinate is then compared to another group of seeds, the control group, that has not been heated. All other variables, such as light and water, will remain the same for each group.
Which was the first widely used high-level programming language?
Fortran, Formula Translator, was developed by IBM in the late 1950s. John Backus, 1924 to 2007, was the head of the team that developed Fortran. Designed for scientific work containing mathematical formulas, Fortran allowed programmers to use algebraic expressions rather than cryptic assembly code. The Fortran compiler translated the algebraic expressions into machine-level code. By the late 1960s, Fortran was available on almost every computer, especially IBM machines, and utilized by many users.
What is the relationship between lichens and pollution?
Lichens are extremely sensitive to pollutants in the atmosphere and can be used as bioindicators of air quality. They absorb minerals from the air, from rainwater, and directly from their substrate. Lichen growth has been used as an indicator of air pollution, especially sulfur dioxide. Pollutants are absorbed by lichens, causing the destruction of their chlorophyll, which leads to a decrease in the occurrence of photosynthesis and changes in membrane permeability. Lichens are generally absent in and around cities, even though suitable substrates exist. The reason for this is the polluted exhaust from automobiles and industrial activity. They are beginning to disappear from national parks and other relatively remote areas that are becoming increasingly contaminated by industrial pollution. The return of lichens to an area frequently indicates a reduction in air pollution. Lichens are also used to assess radioactive pollution levels in the vicinity of uranium mines. Environments where nuclear-powered satellites have crashed. Former nuclear bomb testing sites, and power stations that have incurred accidents. Following the Chernobyl nuclear power station disaster in 1986. Arctic lichens as far away as Lapland were tested and showed levels of radioactive dust that were as much as 165 times higher than had been previously recorded.
What are the main characteristics of animals?
Animals are a very diverse group of organisms, but all of them share a number of characteristics. Animals are multicellular eukaryotes that are heterotrophic, ingesting and digesting food inside the body. Animal cells lack the cell walls that provide support in the bodies of plants and fungi. Most animals have muscle systems and nervous systems responsible for movement and rapid response to stimuli in their environment. In addition, most animals reproduce sexually with the diploid stage dominating the life cycle. In most species a large, non-motile egg is fertilized by a small, flagellated sperm, thus forming a diploid zygote. The transformation of a zygote to an animal of a specific form depends on the controlled expression in the developing embryo of special regulatory genes.
What are the Van Allen belts?
The Van Allen belts, or zones, are two regions of highly charged particles above Earth's equator trapped by the magnetic field that surrounds Earth. Also called the magnetosphere, the first belt extends from a few hundred to about 2,000 miles, 3,200 kilometers above Earth's surface, and the second is between 9,000 and 12,000 miles, 14,500 to 19,000 kilometers. The particles, mainly protons and electrons, come from the solar wind and cosmic rays. The belts are named in honor of James Van Allen, 1914 to 2006. The American physicist who discovered them in 1958 and 1959 with the aid of radiation counters. Carried aboard the artificial satellites Explorer I, 1958, and Pioneer 3, 1959. In May 1998 there were a series of large, solar disturbances that caused a new Van Allen belt to form in the so-called slot region between the inner and outer Van Allen belts. The new belt eventually disappeared once the solar activity subsided. There were also a number of satellite upsets around the same time involving the Galaxy 4 satellite, Iridium satellites, and others. This is not the first time that a temporary new belt has been observed to form in the same region. But it takes a prolonged period of solar storm activity to populate this region with particles.
What is the most famous human pedigree?
The sex-linked pattern of the inheritance of hemophilia within the royal family of Queen Victoria. 1819 to 1901, and Prince Albert, 1819 to 1861, is perhaps the most famous human pedigree.
Who developed the process for making ammonia?
Known since ancient times, ammonia, NH3, has been commercially important for more than 100 years. The first breakthrough in the large-scale synthesis of ammonia resulted from the work of Fritz Haber, 1863 to 1934.
How often does a person blink?
The rate of blinking varies, but on average the eye blinks once every 5 seconds, 12 blinks per minute. Assuming the average person sleeps 8 hours a day and is awake for 16 hours. He or she would blink 11,520 times a day, or 4,204,800 times a year. The average blink of the human eye lasts about 0.05 seconds.
Which chemical is used in greater quantities than any other?
Sodium chloride, NaCl, or salt, has over 14,000 uses, and is probably used in greater quantities and for more applications than any other chemical.
What names are used for groups of birds?
A group of birds in general is called a congregation, flight, flock, volée, or volley. Below is a list specific to types of birds.
How long is the digestive tract?
The digestive tract, also called the alimentary canal, is approximately 30 feet, 9 meters, long from the mouth to the anus. The small intestine is about 22 feet, 7 meters, long. The large intestine is about 5 feet, 1.5 meters, long.
When was the nucleus first described?
The Scottish botanist Robert Brown, 1773 to 1858, first named and described the nucleus in 1831, while studying orchids. Brown called this structure the nucleus, from the Latin nucula, meaning little nut or kernel.
What is the Hippocratic Oath?
The Hippocratic Oath is the traditional oath physicians take when they graduate from medical school. It can be traced back to the Greek physician and teacher Hippocrates, c. 460 B.C. 377 BCE. The oath reads as follows: I swear by Apollo the physician, by Aesculapius, Hygeia, and Panacea. And I take to witness all the gods, all the goddesses, to keep according to my ability and my judgment the following oath. To consider dear to me as my parents him who taught me this art. To live in common with him and if necessary to share my goods with him, to look upon his children as my own brothers. To teach them this art if they so desire without fee or written promise. To impart to my sons and the sons of the master who taught me and the disciples who have enrolled themselves and have agreed to rules of the profession, but to these alone, the precepts and the instruction. I will prescribe regimes for the good of my patients according to my ability and my judgment and never to harm anyone. To please no one will I prescribe a deadly drug, nor give advice which may cause his death. Nor will I give a woman a pessary to procure abortion. But I will preserve the purity of my life and my art. I will not cut for stone, even for patients in whom the disease is manifest. I will leave this operation to be performed by practitioners, specialists in this art. In every house where I come I will enter only for the good of my patients, keeping myself far from all intentional ill-doing and all seduction, and especially from the pleasures of love with women or with men, be they free or slaves. All that may come to my knowledge in the exercise of my profession or outside of my profession or in daily commerce with men, which ought not to be spread abroad, I will keep secret and will never reveal. If I keep this oath faithfully, may I enjoy life and practice my art, respected by all men and in all times, but if I swerve from it or violate it, may the reverse be my lot. The oath varies slightly in wording among different sources, and many medical schools have adopted modern versions of the oath.
Why was the Michelson-Morley experiment important?
This experiment on light waves, first carried out in 1881 by physicists Albert A. 6 Michelson, 1852–1931, and E. W. Morley, 1838–1923, in the United States, is one of the most historically significant experiments in physics and led to the development of Einstein's theory of relativity. The original experiment, using the Michelson interferometer, attempted to detect the velocity of Earth. With respect to the hypothetical luminiferous ether, a medium in space proposed to carry light waves. The procedure measured the speed of light in the direction of Earth and the speed of light at right angles to Earth's motion. No difference was found. This result discredited the ether theory and ultimately led to the proposal by Albert Einstein, 1879–1955, that the speed of light is a universal constant.
What are the advantages of compact fluorescent light bulbs over incandescent light bulbs?
Compact fluorescent light bulbs, CFLs, have the following advantages over incandescent light bulbs when used properly. They last up to 10 times longer, use about a quarter of the energy, and produce 90% less heat, while producing more light per watt. For example, a 27-watt compact fluorescent lamp provides about 1,800 lumens, compared to 1,750 lumens from a 100-watt incandescent lamp. CFLs are most efficient in areas where lights are on for long periods of time.
How do scientists know that some meteorites that were found in Antarctica came from the Moon?
Because of the high-quality reference collection of lunar rocks collected during space flights to the Moon. The original 1979 meteorite find in Antarctica and the 10 subsequent findings were verified as lunar in origin.
Can a person using an abacus calculate more rapidly than someone using a calculator?
In 1946, the Tokyo staff of Stars and Stripes sponsored a contest between a Japanese abacus expert and an American accountant using the best electric adding machine then available. The abacus operator proved faster in all calculations except the multiplication of very large numbers. While today's electronic calculators are much faster and easier to use than the adding machines used in 1946, undocumented tests still show that an expert can add and subtract faster on an abacus than someone using an electronic calculator. It also allows long division and multiplication problems with more digits than a hand calculator can accommodate.
How many groups are identified in the domain bacteria?
Biologists recognize at least a dozen different groups of bacteria.
What is the ecliptic?
Ecliptic refers to the apparent yearly path of the Sun through the sky with respect to the stars. In the spring, the ecliptic in the northern hemisphere is angled high in the evening sky. In fall, the ecliptic lies much closer to the horizon.
When is it more economical to restart an automobile rather than let it idle?
Tests by the Environmental Protection Agency have shown that it is more economical to turn an engine off rather than let it idle if the idle time exceeds 60 seconds.
Why do people need sleep?
Scientists do not know exactly why people need sleep, but studies show that sleep is necessary for survival. Sleep appears to be necessary for the nervous system to work properly. While too little sleep one night may leave us feeling drowsy and unable to concentrate the next day. A prolonged period of too little sleep leads to impaired memory and physical performance. Hallucinations and mood swings may develop if sleep deprivation continues.
How does an electromagnet work?
Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted, 1777 to 1851, was the first to observe a connection between electricity and magnetism. He found that a current in a wire caused a nearby compass needle to rotate thereby establishing that an electric current always produces a magnetic field around itself. When an electric current flows through a wire wrapped around a piece of iron, it creates a magnetic field in the iron. Electromagnets are used in a wide variety of applications, including doorbells, switches, and valves in heating and cooling equipment to telephones. Large machinery used to lift heavy loads of scrap metal, and particle accelerators.
What is the sun made of?
The sun is an incandescent ball of gases. Its mass is 1.8 x 1027 tons or 1.8 octillion tons, a mass 330,000 times as great as Earth.
How has disposal of solid waste to landfill facilities changed?
Landfilling has been an essential component of waste management for several decades. In 1960, 94% of all garbage was sent to landfills. During the following decades, although the amount of municipal solid waste increased, the amount going to landfills decreased. During the years 1990 to 2008, the total amount of waste going to Landfills decreased from 142.3 million tons to 135.1 million tons. Much of this decrease was due to an increased amount of waste being recycled. As of 2008, there were 1,812 landfills in the continental United States. Although the number of landfills in the United States has decreased, the average landfill size has increased. At the national level, capacity of existing landfills is sufficient.
If Earth were a uniform sphere, how much water would cover the surface?
It is estimated that 97% of all water in the world, or over 1 quadrillion acre-feet, 1,234 x 1,015 cubic meters, is contained within the oceans. If Earth were a uniform sphere, this volume of water would cover Earth to a depth of 800 feet, 244 meters.
What are the two phases of breathing?
Breathing, or ventilation, is the process of moving air into and out of the lungs. The two phases are, 1. Inspiration, or inhalation, and 2. Expiration, or exhalation. Inspiration is the movement of air into the lungs, while expiration is the movement of air out of the lungs. The respiratory cycle consists of one inspiration followed by one expiration. The volume of air that enters or leaves during a single respiratory cycle is called the tidal volume. Tidal volume is typically 500 milliliters, meaning that 500 milliliters of air enters during inspiration and the same amount leaves during expiration.
What are organelles?
Organelles, frequently called little organs, are found in all eukaryotic cells. They are specialized, membrane-bound, cellular structures that perform a specific function.
Who made the first successful synthetic gemstone?
In 1902, Auguste Victor Louis Vermeuil, 1856–1913, synthesized the first man-made gemstone, a ruby. Vermeuil perfected a flame fusion method of producing crystals of ruby and other corundums within a short time period.
Where were the first successful ironworks in America?
Although iron ore in this country was first discovered in North Carolina in 1585, and the manufacture of iron was first undertaken, but never accomplished, in Virginia in 1619, the first successful iron works in America was established by Thomas Dexter and Robert Bridges near the Saugus River in Lynn, Massachusetts. As the original promoters of the enterprise, they hired John Winthrop Jr. from England to begin production. By 1645, a blast furnace had begun operations, and by 1648 a forge was working there.
Who developed the poliomyelitis vaccine for polio?
Immunologist Jonas E. Salk, 1914 to 1995, developed the first vaccine, made from a killed virus, against poliomyelitis and is known as the man who defeated polio. In 1952 he prepared and tested the vaccine, and in 1954 massive field tests were successfully undertaken. 2 years later immunologist Albert Sabin, 1906 to 1993, developed an oral vaccine made from inactivated live viruses of 3 polio strains. Currently, an inactivated polio vaccine, IPV, is given as an injection at ages 2 months, 4 months, 6 to 18 months, and a booster at 4 to 6 years.
How much of Earth's surface is land and how much is water?
Approximately 30% of Earth's surface is land. This is about 57,259,000 square miles, 148,300,000 square kilometers. The area of Earth's water surface is approximately 139,692,000 square miles. 361,800,000 square kilometers, or 70% of the total surface area.
When were relief maps first used?
The Chinese were the first to use relief maps, in which the contours of the terrain were represented in models. Relief maps in China go back at least to the 3rd century BCE. Some early maps were modeled in rice or carved in wood. It is likely that the idea of making relief maps was transmitted from the Chinese to the Arabs and then to Europe. The earliest known relief map in Europe was a map showing part of Austria, made in 1510 by Paul Daux.
What is tropism?
Troism is the movement of a plant in response to a stimulus. The categories include, chemotropism, a response to chemicals by plants in which uncurling of leaves may occur; gravitropism, formerly called geotropism, a response to gravity in which the plant moves in relation to gravity. Shoots of a plant are negatively geotropic, growing upward, while roots are positively geotropic, growing downward. Hydrotropism, a response to water or moisture in which roots grow toward the water source. Paraheliotropism, a response by the plant leaves to avoid exposure to the Sun phototropism, a response to light in which the plant may be positively phototropic. Moving toward the light source, or negatively phototropic, moving away from the light source. Main axes of shoots are usually positively phototropic, whereas roots are generally insensitive to light. Thermotropism, a response to temperature by plants. Thigmotropism or haptotropism, a response to touch by the climbing organs of a plant.
What is the medical term for a heart attack?
Myocardial infarction is the term used for a heart attack in which part of the heart muscle cells die as a result of reduced blood flow through one of the main arteries, many times due to arteriosclerosis. The outlook for the patient is dependent on the size and location of the blockage and extent of damage. But 33% of patients die within 20 days after the attack. It is a leading cause of death in the United States. Also, almost half of sudden deaths due to myocardial infarction occur before hospitalization. However, the possibility of recovery improves if vigorous treatment begins immediately.
When were the first cases of West Nile virus reported in the United States?
The first cases of West Nile virus were identified in 1999 in the New York City area. West Nile virus is primarily a disease of birds found in Africa, West Asia, and the Middle East. It is transmitted to humans mainly via mosquito bites, mainly from the species Culex pipiens. The female mosquito catches the virus when it bites an infected bird and then passes it on when it later bites a human. In humans it causes encephalitis, an infection of the brain that can be lethal.
What is email?
Electronic mail, known more commonly as email, uses communication facilities to transmit messages. A user can send a message to a single recipient or to many different recipients at one time. Different systems offer different options for sending, receiving, manipulating text, and addressing. For example, a message can be registered, so that the sender is notified when the recipient looks at the message. Though there is no way to tell if the recipient has actually read the message. Email messages may be forwarded to other recipients. Usually messages are stored in a simulated mailbox in the network server or host computer. Some systems announce incoming mail if the recipient is logged onto the system. An organization, such as a corporation, university, or professional organization, can provide electronic mail facilities. National and international networks can provide them as well.
How large is the uterus?
The uterus, from the Latin, meaning womb, is an inverted, pear-shaped structure located between the urinary bladder and the rectum. The uterus is normally 3 inches, 7.5 centimeters, long and 2 inches, 5 centimeters, wide. It weighs 1 to 1.4 ounces, 30 to 40 grams. During pregnancy, implantation of a fertilized ovum occurs in the uterus. The uterus then houses, nourishes, and protects the developing fetus. It can increase 3 to 6 times in size during the course of pregnancy. At the end of gestation, the uterus is usually 12 inches, 30 centimeters, long and weighs 2.4 pounds, 1,100 grams. The total weight of the uterus and its contents, fetus and fluid, at the end of pregnancy is approximately 22 pounds, 10 kilograms.
Who invented Teflon?
In 1938, the American engineer Roy J. Plunkett, 1910 to 1994, at DuPont de Nemours discovered the polymer of tetrafluoroethylene, PTFE, by accident. This fluorocarbon is marketed under the name of Fluon in Great Britain and Teflon in the United States. Patented in 1939 and first exploited commercially in 1954. PTFE is resistant to all acids and has exceptional stability and excellent electrical insulating properties. It is used in making piping for corrosive materials, in insulating devices for radio transmitters, in pump gaskets, and in computer microchips. In addition, its non-stick properties make PTFE an ideal material for surface coatings. In 1956, French engineer Marc Gregoire discovered a process whereby he could fix a thin layer of Teflon on an aluminum surface. He then patented the process of applying it to cookware, and the non-stick frying pan was created.
What are some common culinary herbs?
Herbs are often used to enhance flavors in food. They are usually from the leaves of non-woody plants.
How does the immune system work?
The immune system has two main components, white blood cells and antibodies circulating in the blood. The antigen-antibody reaction forms the basis for this immunity. When an antigen, antibody generator, such as a harmful bacterium, virus, fungus, parasite, or other foreign substance invades the body, a specific antibody is generated to attack the antigen. The antibody is produced by B lymphocytes, B cells, in the spleen or lymph nodes. An antibody may either destroy the antigen directly or it may label it so that a white blood cell, called a macrophage, or scavenger cell, can engulf the foreign intruder. after a human has been exposed to an antigen. A later exposure to the same antigen will produce a faster immune system reaction. The necessary antibodies will be produced more rapidly and in larger amounts. Artificial immunization uses this antigen-antibody reaction to protect the human body from certain diseases by exposing the body to a safe dose of antigen to produce effective antibodies as well as a readiness for any future attacks of the harmful antigen.
What are the major characteristics of all chordates?
All chordates share a notochord, dorsal nerve cord, and pharyngeal gill pouches. The notochord, a cartilaginous supporting rod, runs along the dorsal part of the body. It is always found in embryos, but in most vertebrates it is replaced during development by a backbone of bony or cartilaginous vertebrae. The tubular dorsal nerve cord, dorsal to the notochord, is formed during development by an enfolding of the ectoderm. In vertebrates the nerve cord eventually becomes encased and thus protected by the backbone. The pharyngeal gill pouches appear during embryonic development on both sides of the throat region, the pharynx.
What are the common mathematical formulas for area?
Area of a rectangle, area equals length times width A equals LW. Area equals altitude times base A equals of area of a circle. Area equals pi times the radius squared. A equals tier 2 or A equals 1/4 TID2. Area of a triangle. Area equals 1/2 the altitude times the base. A equals 1/2 of area of the surface of a sphere. Area equals 4 times pi times the radius squared. A equals 4 tier 2 or A equals TID2. Area of a square, area equals length times width, or length of one side squared. A equals S23. Area of a cube, area equals square of the length of one side times 6. A equals 6S2. Area of an ellipse, area equals long diameter times short diameter times 0.7854. Volume of a cylinder, volume equals area of the base times the height. V equals BH. Volume of a circular cylinder with circular base, volume equals pi times the square of the radius of the base times the height. V equals tier 2 H. Volume of a cube, volume equals the length of one side cubed. V equals S3. Volume of a cone, volume equals 1/3 times pi times the square of the radius of the base times the height. V equals 1/3 tier 2 H. Volume of a rectangular solid, volume equals length times width times height. V equals LWH.
How fast do fingernails grow?
Healthy nails grow about 0.12 inch, 3 millimeters, each month or 1.4 inches, 3.5 centimeters, each year. It takes approximately 3 months for a whole fingernail to be replaced. The middle fingernail grows the fastest. Because the longer the finger, the faster its nail growth. The thumbnail grows the slowest.
What is aromatherapy?
Holistic medicine looks at the health of the whole individual. And treatments emphasize the connection of mind, body, and spirit. Aromatherapy involves using particular scents derived from essential oils to influence emotions and to treat and cure minor ailments. It is based on the fact that the olfactory and emotional centers of the body are connected. By inhaling different aromas, emotional concerns as well as physical complaints are said to be eased. The term aromatherapy was first used by René Maurice Gattefossé. 1881 to 1950, a French perfume chemist. He discovered the healing powers of lavender oil following a laboratory accident during which he burned his hand. Gattefossé began to investigate the properties of lavender oil and other essential oils and published a book on plant extracts. During aromatherapy treatments, essential oils are absorbed through breath or the pores of the skin. This process triggers certain physiological responses.
Who invented the thermometer?
The Greeks of Alexandria knew that air expanded as it was heated. Hero of Alexandria, 1st century CE. And Philo of Byzantium made simple thermoscopes, but they were not real thermometers. In 1592, Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642, made a kind of thermometer that also functioned as a barometer. And in 1612 his friend Sant'Orio 1561 to 1636, adapted the air thermometer. A device in which a colored liquid was driven down by the expansion of air. To measure the body's temperature change during illness and recovery. Still, it was not until 1713 that Daniel Fahrenheit 1686 to 1736, began developing a thermometer with a fixed scale. He worked out his scale from two fixed points: the melting point of ice and the heat of the healthy human body. He realized that the melting point of ice was a constant temperature, whereas the freezing point of water varied. Fahrenheit put his thermometer into a mixture of ice, water, and salt, which he marked off as 0 degrees. And using this as a starting point, marked off melting ice at 32 degrees and blood heat at 96 degrees. In 1835, it was discovered that normal blood measured 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes Fahrenheit used spirit of wine as the liquid in the thermometer tube. But more often he used specially purified mercury. Later, the boiling point of water, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, became the upper fixed point.
What are the alkali metals?
These are the elements at the left of the periodic table: lithium, Li, element 3, potassium, K, element 19, rubidium, Rb, element 37, cesium, Cs, element 55, francium, Fr, element 87, and sodium, Na, element 11. The alkali metals are sometimes called the sodium family of elements, or group I elements. Because of their great chemical ate reactivity, they easily form positive ions. None exists in nature in the elemental state.
What is the chemical used in watches to make them glow in the dark?
Generally, radioactive paints are used to make watch surfaces visible in the dark. These paints, which do not require activation by an outside light source, will glow for several years. In the past, radium was often the active substance used in luminescent paints for watch faces. However, the practice was discontinued when it was found to emit dangerous gamma rays. The radioactive materials used today give off much lower emissions, which are easily blocked by the glass or plastic covering the watch face. These substances include tritium, krypton-85, promethium-147, and thallium-204.
What plant has the largest leaves?
The Monstera, Monstera deliciosa, has dark green, glossy leaves that measure 2 to 3 feet, 0.6 to 0.9 meter, long when mature.
What determines eye color?
Variations in eye color range from light blue to dark brown and are inherited. Eye color is chiefly determined by the amount and distribution of melanin within the irises. If melanin is present only in the epithelial cells that cover the posterior surface of the iris appears blue. When this condition exists together with denser than usual tissue within the body of the iris, it looks gray. When melanin is present within the body of the iris, as well as the epithelial covering, the iris appears brown. Green and hazel eyes result from an increase in the amount of a combination of yellow and black melanin.
How is charcoal made?
Commercial production of charcoal uses wood processing residues, such as sawdust, shavings, milled wood, and bark, as a raw material. Depending on the material, the residues are placed in kilns or furnaces and heated at low oxygen concentrations. A Harrishoff furnace can produce at least a ton of charcoal per hour.
How much force does a human bite generate?
All the jaw muscles working together can close the teeth with a force as great as 55 pounds. 25 kilograms, on the incisors, or 200 pounds, 90.7 kilograms, on the molars. A force as great as 268 pounds, 122 kilograms, for molars has been reported.
What is the ABCD survey first responders use to evaluate an emergency?
A stands for airway. It is important to be certain the airway from the mouth or nose to the lungs is clear. The airway can be opened by tilting the head back and lifting the chin. B stands for breathing. Be certain the person is breathing or perform rescue breathing, CPR, to ensure a supply of oxygen. C stands for circulation. If a pulse cannot be found, then there is no blood circulating. Emergency personnel can attempt to get the heart to resume breathing by performing rhythmic chest thrusts, CPR. Adults require 15 chest compressions for every 2 rescue breaths. It also means to check for profuse bleeding, which must be controlled. D stands for disability. It involves checking for consciousness and the likelihood of spinal cord or neck injury.
How far are the planets from the Sun?
The planets revolve around the Sun in elliptical orbits, with the Sun at one focus of the ellipse. Thus, a planet is at times closer to the Sun than at other times. The distances given below are the average distance from the Sun. Starting with Mercury, the planet closest to the Sun, and moving outward.
What percentage of Earth's surface is tropical rainforest?
Rainforests account for approximately 7% of Earth's surface, or about 3 million square miles, 7.7 million square kilometers.
What does pH mean when applied to soil?
Literally, pH stands for potential of hydrogen and is the term used by soil scientists to represent the hydrogen ion concentration in a soil sample. The relative alkalinity acidity is commonly expressed in terms of the symbol pH. The neutral point in the scale is 7, soil testing below 7 is said to be acidic. Soil testing above pH 7 is alkaline. The pH values are based on logarithms with a base of 10. Thus, a soil testing pH 5 is 10 times as acidic as soil testing pH 5. While a soil testing pH 4 is 100 times as acidic as soil testing pH 6.
Is light a wave or a particle?
Scientists have debated for centuries whether light is a wave or a particle. Isaac Newton, 1642–1727, was one of the early proponents of the particulate or corpuscular theory of light. According to this theory, light travels as a stream of particles that come from a source, such as the sun, travel to an object and are then reflected to an observer. One of the early proponents of the wave theory of light was Dutch physicist Christiaan Huygens, 1629–1695. According to the wave theory of light, light travels through space in the form of a wave, similar to water waves. Albert Einstein's work in 1905 showed that light is a bundle of tiny particles, called photons. Scientists now believe that light has properties of both waves and particles, explained as wave-particle duality.
How many women have been awarded the Nobel Prize in chemistry, physics, or physiology or medicine?
Since 1901, the Nobel Prize in chemistry, physics, or physiology or medicine has been awarded to women 16 times to 15 different women. Marie Curie, 1867–1934, was the only woman and one of the few individuals to receive the Nobel Prize twice.
Which U.S. state produces the most crude oil?
Texas is the largest producer of crude oil in the United States. In 2008, Texas produced 398,000 and 14,000 barrels of oil. Alaska is the second largest producer of crude oil in the United States, producing 249,874,000 barrels of oil in 2008.
Why do golf balls have dimples?
The dimples minimize the drag, a force that makes a body lose energy as it moves through a fluid or gas, allowing the ball to travel farther than a smooth ball would travel. The air, as it passes over a dimpled ball, tends to cling to the ball longer, reducing the eddies or wake effects that drain the ball's energy. A dimpled ball can travel up to 300 yards, 275 meters, but a smooth ball only goes 70 yards, 65 meters. A ball can have 300 to 500 dimples that can be 0.01 inch, 0.25 millimeter, deep. Another effect 7 to get distance is to give the ball a backspin. With a backspin there is less air pressure on the top of the ball, so the ball stays aloft longer, much like an airplane.
Is hemlock poisonous?
There are two species known commonly as hemlock, Conium maculatum and Tsuga canadensis. Conium maculatum is a weedy plant. All parts of the plant are poisonous. In ancient times, minimal doses of the plant were used to relieve pain with a great risk of poisoning. Conium maculatum was used to carry out the death sentence in ancient times. The Greek philosopher Socrates was condemned to death by drinking a potion made from hemlock. It should not be confused with Tsuga canadensis, a member of the evergreen family. The leaves of the Tsuga canadensis may be used to make tea.
How rapidly is deforestation occurring?
Agriculture, excessive logging, and fires are major causes of deforestation. Afforestation and the natural expansion of forests help to decrease the rate of deforestation. The rate of deforestation has decreased from 16 million hectares, 61,776 square miles, per year during the 1990s to 13 million hectares, 50,193 square miles, per year in the decade 2000 to 2010, according to preliminary data for the decade. The net change in forest area for 2000 to 2010 is estimated at minus 5.2 million hectares, 20,007 square miles, per year, an area about the size of Costa Rica. Down from minus 8.3 million hectares, 32,046 square miles, per year in the 1990s.
What was the first animal to be successfully cloned?
In 1970, the British molecular biologist John B. Gordon, 1933, cloned a frog. He transplanted the nucleus of an intestinal cell from a tadpole into a frog's egg that had had its nucleus removed. The egg developed into an adult frog that had the tadpole's genome in all of its cells and was therefore a clone of the tadpole.